So it's cold, it's not really that cold, but we're going to see if we can light a fire here using some of the materials in the bush. Just best place to start looking and look for the conifers, the needle trees, look for the dead ones. Okay, before we build the fire, we've got to find us a good spot to build one. So usually closer to a tree. You want to make sure there's no branches right directly above you, or if you're going to make a shelter, you have to take that in accordance. But for this demonstration, what we're going to do, because obviously there's some snow, you don't want to start building a fire on the snow because it's just going to melt down. Here it's relatively not so deep, right? So you can get right down to the earth. In some places you can't. So just because of the snow, if you build a fire on top, it'll just continue to melt and it'll fall in, and then your fire usually goes out unless you have a lot of fuel to sustain it. So for now, we're going to pretend that we have quite a bit of snow, and we'll do that method first. First thing you want to do is want to get yourself some material, some larger stuff, and lay it down so the fire can't fall directly in. So anything like branches like that, logs. Just be careful, you start hitting trees and there's clumps of snow above you, it's going to come down on you. So make a nice little bed, like so. Always remember, when you're swinging an axe, swinging away, if it catches you in the leg, then you got some real problems. Try to hit the wood at a bit of an angle. Just the way the grain of the wood goes, it makes it easier to cut. Unless it gets thin, and then you can just turn it and flip it. Makes it pretty easy. Notice I didn't bring any gloves. That was sort of intentional, because it's a bit of a demonstration how quick your dexterity of your fingers leave you. Start getting cold, don't warm it up, well then you got problems. So we'll find some more smaller stuff, you can get it all together. So all makes good bedding. Keeps that fire from falling through. Also, if you're ever in a survival situation and build yourself a little cave, we'll get into that at some point. You want to create yourself a nice bed where you can lay down on, because you start sleeping in the snow, you're pretty conductive, because and you're going to get cold really quickly. Here's another thing to look out for. You see this? Little bits of pitch. We'll save that to the end there, because that's sort of what we need. It'll help lighting fire. And we got all kinds of fuel, witch's hair or old man's beard, whatever you want to call it. Right, it all lights up. Not quite as good as birch bark, but if you see here, there's not many birch trees around. I'm sure if I looked a bit, head towards a water source or something, I could probably find some. There's some poplars and stuff over there. But for now, we'll just get a bunch of sticks, chop them down, get a bed for the fire. And usually if you go to a thicker part of the bush, the canopy comes down quite a bit further, and you end up with a lot of really dry material. So this might be a little bit of a challenge, but we got this bed right here. We'll see if we can just use this. See, look how it comes apart. It's crunching really nicely. So the key is pretty simple. You start with a smaller fuel, and then you get progressively bigger, just to help the fire out. Helps it consume it, and then eventually get to a nice warm fire, which keeps you warm. If it's too small, you're just going to exhaust your resources, whether it be matches and or lighters or whatever you got, if that fire decides to keep going out on you. So when it's really cold, it's not so important to keep your tinder out of the snow, but if it's fairly cold, you don't really have to worry about it, because it doesn't make it wet. So right now what I'm going to try to do is get some really dry wood chips. because this will really make our life a lot easier when it comes to starting fires. And just always remember, especially with light axes, these things can go flying down, and before you know it, you got it stuck in your leg. And not only are you putting yourself in harm's way, but imagine all the rescuers that have to come out there, right? Start putting other people at risk. So, you know, it's always a good idea to practice. What I would do is start with a heavier axe, long handle. Look at that, nice chips coming off. There we go. Now I just pick them up and bring it to my fire spot. You really want to focus on these really small ones like this. This is sort of what you want to look for, because those are the first to start. You want to get all of them, obviously, as many as you can. Make sure you don't carry any snow in your hand, because if it starts melting, then it sort of defeats the purpose of trying to cut into the dry heart of the tree. And usually when you're in a really wooded area, it's a lot easier to find this type of wood, right? So nice chips. I'm a big fan. I've been doing that lately, is just using lots of chips. A lot of guys, they swear by the teepee method, which is awesome and it works great, but I find with having the small chips around, it just makes the fire start a little bit better, especially if you're not using any materials to start it, such as paper or liquid fuels. Ideally, if you're going in the bush, it doesn't hurt to just have a little bit of liquid fuel with you, or something simple like a cotton swab with some Vaseline. Burns really well. We'll get to that with more fire building, but for now we're just going to build this little fire and see what we can do with it. We're back to our spot, and in this case I brought a lighter with me, make things a little bit easier. First of all, get my hands a little bit warmer, because picking this cold wood cools you off pretty quick, and if you can't move your fingers, well, good luck trying to get a fire going, or the rest of it. One thing you want to keep in mind is try not to kneel into the snow, especially if you're wearing cotton, anything like that, because you start melting the snow and absorbing it. It's no good. You'll get cold and wet. And in the winter time, that's really bad, because you can freeze yourself pretty quick. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm having a look to see some of these lighter pieces with the really thin edges, right? Usually you could take some of this stuff here and crumble it up, but I found that when there's lots of moisture in the air, or it's really cold, sometimes that stuff really absorbs it, and it's not as dry as it should be. So we'll give this a shot, see how it works. Oh, keep her nice and close. Okay. Crunching is always a good idea, or a good sound, when it starts popping like that. See, and then you hold the flame in place if you can, right? Slowly add to it. Of course, if you got really windy conditions, this gets a lot harder. A lot harder. Yeah, give it patience. And then you start closing it in. Oh, gotta make sure that edge keeps so. See, essentially what you're doing, you're creating a little oven which will start preheating the wood and make it burn. You can feel with the smoke it's already picking up some heat. This is something that's just fun to practice and that everybody should really try to do at some point, right? Especially if you live in northern climates. Ever get stuck on the side of the road and you're not preparing yourself for that trip. You know, there's certain circumstance or consequences, I should say. Because nobody wants to freeze to death. Start adding sticks. Push it down a bit. See, then with the branches, the smaller stuff that I use as a bed, you can bring to the center and also use as a fire starter. There it is. Where there's smoke, there's fire. That's what we want. Nice little fire starting to break through the branches a little bit. Creating a nice hot core. Now you could start getting larger and larger branches. Again, making sure that they're nice and dry. Right? I find when you're building fires, try to keep all the wood going in one direction. It just keeps that heat in. Right? Keeps that heat in quite a bit. And that's what you want in the wet. You want a fire that you can sort of keep contained and have it burn in on itself, because that's where the heat comes from. If it's a loose fire, like for example like a teepee style fire, you know, it'll burn really quickly, or it won't burn at all because there's just not enough heat to keep it going.